Is the new iPad 10 really worth $450 when you can get an iPad Air 5 for $520 or a refurbished iPad Air 4 for $418? Well, today we will find out because we're gonna compare everything from the speakers, the displays, the cameras, the connection speeds, the performance of the A14 compared to the A14 and the M1 chip in the iPad Airs, and much more. Now, as far as the dimensions, they look like they're the same, but the iPad 10 is actually slightly heavier and slightly thicker, as well as being slightly wider. The iPad 10 is also slightly taller as well, and that is because the bezels are larger all around, and that is due to the display, which we'll talk about in just a sec. Both of them have the Touch ID sensor that's larger at the top right there, and both of them have the same exact cameras on the back as well as the quality of the front ones, but there is one change we'll talk about. Now, one thing that did change as far as the design of the outside is the fact that the iPad Air, both the 4 and 5, has that magnetic connection for the Apple Pencil 2, whereas the iPad 10 does not. And the smart connector is also not on the back like we have with the iPad Airs, but on the side now. Now, as far as the displays, they actually have the same exact 10.9-inch LCD display. The detail and the sharpness is identical, and both of them go up to the same 500 nits of brightness. Other than that, we have two differences. First off, the iPad Airs support DCI-P3 colors, so you have much better gradation for editing photos, videos, whereas Apple locked down the iPad 10 to sRGB. The other difference is that the iPad Airs have a laminated display, so the screen is glued to the touch surface, whereas the iPad 10 still has a non-laminated display, so there's this air gap between the glass here, which not only makes it so when you're using the Apple Pencil, you don't exactly touch where you see display drawing, but it also lowers down your contrast and it increases reflectivity. Honestly, this is one of my biggest disappointments. Even though it is less expensive to fix a non-laminated display, you guys see that difference in contrast and reflectivity. It is pretty massive. Now, the next thing that I'm very curious about are the speakers, because Apple finally added stereo speakers into the regular iPad, whereas the iPad Air, both the 4 and 5 have had them for a while, and I wanna know, do they sound much better than what seems to be the same? Let's go ahead and take a listen. All right, guys, that's exactly what I thought when I first heard the iPad 10. Yes, it's better than the 9, but it didn't sound that great. And now we hear that the iPad Air 5 and the Air 4, not only does it get louder, the highest frequencies are more clear, the treble's better, and the bass bumps a lot more. So the speakers are better in every single way. And the only reason I think that could happen is if Apple used the speakers from the iPad mini in this new iPad 10, whereas the main drivers from the iPad Pro are in the iPad Air. So the difference is pretty significant. And now let's talk about Apple Pencil support. The iPad Air 4 and 5 supports the Apple Pencil 2, which has a nicer shape. It supports functions when you tap it. It magnetically attaches to charge and to connect to your iPad or Pair, and you can draw with very little latency or lag, especially with that laminated display. The experience is quite good, a lot better than when I tested the Gen 1 yesterday. Now, with the iPad 10, Apple made some very weird choices. First off, you saw there was no magnet there before, and they are supporting only the original Apple Pencil from 2015 that is not only a lot worse technically, but it has that lightning connector, meaning there is no way to plug it into Pair or to charge without having a separate adapter. And they do not include that adapter in the box. You do get a nice braided charging cable, but personally, I'd rather have that $9 adapter included. And I can't even test this out right now because those didn't come out for a week after these iPads, even though I ordered right away. Now, the performance should be identical to the iPad 9, where you do have some delay and some latency, so it's definitely not great. And it sucks sucks that Apple made us choose this option. Now they're including that adapter if you buy a new Apple Pencil, but those were also pushed back as far as shipping. And so many people already have these already that it sucks to have to spend extra money to make it work. Now, once we get that adapter, we will compare it to the iPad Air and talk about the performance in our full review. So make sure to click that subscribe button down below so you don't miss that. And now let's compare the keyboards. In my previous video, I said that this was also delayed, even though I pre-ordered it right away. Well, I was able to find one locally, which is great. So let's go ahead and open up this $250 Magic Keyboard Folio and see how well it performs and how it compares to the Magic Keyboard.
Wow, it looks nice, man.
Looks nice?
Oh yeah.
Nice and white, at least while it's brand new.
So clean.
Now, first impressions, the quality is really, really good. That is a strong magnetic hold. It's not going anywhere. And as you guys can see, we have the white color because it is the only color option. Now, the keyboard is split and it magnetically attaches. I thought it'd be snapping stronger than this. Maybe I'm slightly off here. There we go. So we have the folio part where you have this hinge to adjust your angle and that comes up. So that part of it is nice. And then you have the keyboard part. Now, as far as the keyboard here, it feels great, just like any other Apple keyboard. And we also have this trackpad, which is very convenient, turns this into a laptop replacement device. And one really nice thing is that it has this full function row of keys. So you have quick shortcuts to so many things. I love the brightness adjustment, and you can switch tracks, do all those things without having to go and access your control panel. So overall, this keyboard is really nice. And as far as the magnetic strength, I mean, it holds on very well. Now for the iPad Airs, we have Apple's Magic Keyboard, which allows it to float up in the air like this. You'll also have adjustability. You can go lower, open it up, and then be able to tilt up. And that allows the screen to be a little bit closer to your face because it kind of hovers there or is suspended in the air. As you guys can see, we have the black version, so you can choose whatever color you would like. But with this one, we do not have a row of function keys, so you do have to go back to the screen a lot more often. The keys do feel nice, but the trackpad is actually smaller. I don't know how much the difference is in width. Let's just go ahead and place them side by side like this. It's pretty similar, but the depth of it is much shallower on the Magic Keyboard because all these keys are brought down due to that floating functionality. So that means that overall using the trackpad is going to be better on the iPad 10. The Magic Keyboard also has an additional USB Type-C port that you can use for charging, so you still have access to the other one for transferring files or connecting accessories, and you don't have to have a cable sticking out of the side if you're charging, so that's definitely nice. And with that, if you guys take a look at how compact this whole bottom is compared to the setup with the iPad 10, if you're on an airplane or somewhere you don't have a lot of room, this is nice and small. Here you need a lot of extra room for the footprint of the iPad. You guys let me know which design you like better down in the comment section, but the kicker is that instead of spending $250 compared to $300, you can get a renewed Magic Keyboard on Amazon for $167 with a 3-month return policy, which is absolutely crazy. Now, along with the keyboards, we have a difference in camera placement. The quality is the same, but with the iPad 10, I'm looking directly at the screen right here, and it looks exactly like it should. We also have a microphone cut out right there next to the camera. Whereas with the iPad Airs, I'm looking at the same spot, but it looks like I'm looking way off from the side, from the top, because the camera is on that left-hand side. That I would love if the iPad Airs and the Pros, they all switch to this landscape orientation because it's better for everybody. With that, let me know if you hear any difference in terms of microphone quality on the iPad Air or on the iPad 10, if that sounds any better. And now let's get into performance and see how the A14 in the iPad 10 compares to the A14 in the iPad Air 4 and the iPad Air 5 with the M1. Now, both these have USB Type-C ports, but we do have some differences in actual performance. Now, in yesterday's video, I tested out the iPad Air 10 and it took almost 11 minutes to transfer a file that is less than 25 gigabytes. That calculated to just over 40 megabytes per second, meaning that the port on here, even though it's USB Type-C, it is USB 2.0, which has now been confirmed, and that is insane for a brand new device in 2022, almost 2023. And now I'm gonna test the same exact file, copying it over from the same drive with the same cable to the iPad Air 5. And that took 2 minutes and 38 seconds instead of close to 11 minutes. That is a massive difference, and the iPad Air 4 is also gonna have the same speed. Now, the next thing that I wanna test is the speed of the internal drive. Bam, our test is started here. And look at that, guys. I was not expecting that. The speeds are almost identical between them. As far as read, we have 781 compared to 752. And for write, we have 272 compared to 271. And that explains why it took 2 minutes 38 seconds instead of much faster, because we're actually limited by the 64 gigabyte model. So if you have a higher capacity, the write speed will be faster. And that also confirms the USB 2, because even with the same slow write speed, the iPad Air 5 was way faster, and if we had a higher capacity, it would take under a minute if it wasn't limiting it by that write. So that is crazy. And now let's compare the processor performance with Geekbench 5. We have the A14 here with 4 gigs of RAM, and the iPad Air 4 with the A14 also has 4 gigs compared to 8 gigs of RAM with the M1 chip. We have our results, and as far as single core, we have a difference of only about 8%, but for multi-core, the M1 is more than 82% faster. Now the iPad Air 4 with the A14 is about 10% faster than the iPad 10. So even if you buy one of those refurbished ones at a lower price tag, you still get better performance. Now as far as compute performance with the graphics, let's go ahead and see. Here are the scores, and it looks like the iPad 10 is just slightly behind the iPad Air 4 with the A14, but the M1 has almost 21,000 score. That is 70% better performance than the iPad 10. That is crazy. Now, as far as graphics, gaming performance, I'm using 3D Mark's Wildlife Extreme in unlimited mode, which allows it to have the same resolution. It's off screen, so it's perfectly fair. And wow, we have 28.9 frames per second for the M1 compared to 12.2, and the iPad Air 4 at the A14 is higher than 14 FPS, so it gets about 10% faster graphics performance, even though it is the same chip. So if you care about gaming, I mean, this is a massive difference. Now, I don't only want to do these benchmarks, I want to test some real world usage. So here I have Lightroom Mobile opened up with some raw images. These have all been color graded, they've been edited, they have effects added. There's 50 42 megapixel raw files, and I'm going to go ahead and export all of these to JPEGs. And the M1 iPad Air is flying. There you go, both of them are done. We now have all the photos here saved full quality, and the M1 iPad Air took 4 minutes and 18 seconds, while as the A14 iPad, well, that took 8 minutes and 36 seconds. So the M1 iPad Air is basically twice as fast, and I think if we had the upgraded storage, it would be even faster. Now, what about video editing? Here I have a 5-minute cut of my project where I compared the S22 Ultra's 108 megapixels to the iPhone's 48. If you guys haven't seen this video, you guys absolutely have to see it. I'm gonna go ahead and add a filter to this. That way the iPads have a little bit more work to do than just taking this 4K and encoding it. And now let's go ahead and export this 4K video. Now, looking at this status bar here, the M1 iPad isn't that far ahead of the A14 iPad. Bam, the M1 iPad is done, and this one is just a little bit behind. They were neck and neck for a while, and this slowed down, maybe because the chip is throttling. As far as graphics, I'm not sure. And that took 2 minutes and 55 seconds on the M1 iPad Air, and 3 minutes and 24 seconds on the A14, so not really much of a difference there. And if you had the iPad Air 4 that also has the A14, it would be similar to this. Now, why is the iPad so much faster in photos but not in video? Well, that's because we're still limited by the encoders, and the M1 chip uses the same ones as the A14. So for video editors, it's not gonna be a massive difference unless you're doing crazy effects. And now let's talk about battery life. A lot of people ask about this, and it's very interesting for this scenario. The actual battery capacities are practically the same for both iPad Airs and the iPad 10th generation. But what I found is when you're charging them, the highest that I saw the 10th gen iPad reach is 24 watts. Whereas we hit 30 watts on the iPad Air. So that means Apple is capping the wattage for some reason. I don't know why, but it will charge about 25% slower, so it's gonna take longer. Now, as far as the actual battery life themselves, Apple gives you very vague ratings, but the M1 version of the iPad could potentially get better battery life if you're just doing very light loads, very easy tasks. But if you start doing things that really maximize all of that performance that you guys saw from the previous tests, well, then it will drain faster. So it's kind of a wash, but of course, I'd rather have it drain faster and give you my results give you better results, faster exports, better gaming, and then be able to charge it also 25% faster. Now, some of you guys were wondering about Wi-Fi speeds. The specs are very vague. So I went ahead and I ran it here, and we see that the M1 iPad does have faster download speeds, connected same network, everything same, but the uploads were slower, quite slow on both actually. So I don't know if it's better range in general, but these are the results. So overall, is the iPad 10 really worth $450 when you can buy an iPad Air, either the M1 version or the A14 version that's actually less money if it's refurbished, and you can get the keyboard case also for less money? Personally, I do not think so. Now, I really like the landscape camera, and if that's important to you, then that is a really nice feature. But the iPad Airs, either one of them, are better in so many ways, not being limited by that port, having better performance, even with the same A14 chip. Having that laminated display makes a massive difference in reflectivity and contrast. The speakers are quite a bit better. I mean, it's a better device in almost every way. Now, if this iPad was $399 or $350, it would be a whole nother story. But since Apple jacked the price up so much, and since you can get an iPad Air for a discount, especially the refurbished model, it just makes way more sense to me to go that direction. We're gonna have links down below. You guys let me know your thoughts. Click that circle above to subscribe if you wanna see our full review after we use this for regular personal use. Check out one of those great videos right there. This is Max, and I'll see you in the next video.